Hello. So, if it's not enough to have our Prime Minister's credibility questioned, we've also got this other issue with Prince Andrew. And Prince Andrew, like the Prime Minister, was relying on somebody else to make a judgment which would get him off the hook. I don't think this is a very clever approach. In Prince Andrew's case, it hasn't worked. The technicalities were dismissed quite firmly by Judge Kaplan. So Andrew is now facing a civil case with his own absurd rebuttals that have already been rehearsed on BBC Newsnight. This idea that he couldn't sweat, this idea that he was at a Pizza Express with Princess Beatrice, and that there are no witnesses to that pizza visit and no medical testimony to back up the no sweating claims. We would have thought by now somebody would have written a paper about anhydrosis. That's the technical term, I think. Anhydrosis, it's very rare. Medical researchers love the very rare, and Prince Andrew presumably would be a phenomenon who can be investigated medically. I'm sure he would enjoy that. He'd be up there with the Tsarevich and the various members of his family who have haemophilia. Maybe he has haemophilia, but I don't know that anhydrosis is one of the symptoms, one of the side effects of haemophilia. I've certainly never noticed it. But it is interesting that the Queen apparently was noted by some rather charmed Indian observers not to sweat on some long ceremonial occasions back in the 1950s or 1960s. And when she was on foreign tours, she always was composed and calm, never looked flustered or a little, moist in the extreme heat. But Andrew has never said that he inherited this disorder of anhydrosis. He said that he acquired the condition because of the extreme pressure that he was under when he was in the Falklands War. Well, under that extreme pressure, quite the opposite tends to occur. That is a proven medical fact. Anhydrosis is very rare. And the only research that seems to have been done about anhydrosis, about this phenomenon of not sweating, appears to have been about horses. Now, Andrew has various options at this moment. For example, he could fight it out and lose. That would produce some very nasty headlines. And it could go on and on and on all the way through the Queen's Platinum Jubilee year. He could try to come to a settlement with Geoffrey. That may be pricey, but it may be that after all this time she wants her day in court and she may refuse any settlement offer. There is a third option, that he could ignore the whole thing and lose by default and then claim that he didn't want to dignify the case by testifying. Well, the problem is this approach is shot to pieces by the fact that he gave the BBC interview, which was precisely why those advisors who were giving him advice told him not to do the BBC interview. Andrew has only himself to blame. Well, I think he has slightly more than only himself to blame. I think he also has to blame the very, very strange pandering court that he seems to have assembled around himself. He has them to blame as well, because they are stringing him along. He doesn't have very much leeway. He has almost none. He has only three options, and they don't look very promising. This is very similar to the options facing Boris. He has very few options. And what was particularly striking in Boris's performance today in the House of Commons was not the fact that he bumbled along and that he looked rather crestfallen and contrite, certainly, but that the serried ranks of the Conservative Party seated behind him were for the most part silent. That I think is telling, and that is worrying, and I think those serried ranks, out of those serried ranks will come a decision much sooner than anything proffered by the person conducting the investigation. I don't think Boris will have to wait that long. But I believe that replacing Boris at this stage with the obvious candidates of Rishi Sunak or Liz Truss would be a mistake. We would end up in further hot water than we are in at the moment. The country simply is not ready for that sort of chaos at this stage. I think the much better option is to wait for a general election and see Sir Keir Starmer romp home and actually give him another year or so. Keir Starmer will find his feet and I think will prove to be a magnificent Prime Minister. That is simply an objective opinion. Anyway, this video is really about Prince Andrew and his, what should we say, rank stupidity? Something to do. He really is a very, very silly man at the moment, it appears. And no matter what sympathy one may feel for his family, for his daughters, he's done everything wrong so far, and that's simply. And when you want to judge that, when you want to ask, what is that? That is stupidity. Whether it's because he himself has made these decisions or he's relied on people who have been too awed by his coronet, it doesn't really matter. There comes a point when the job of someone who is advising the rich and the mighty, the privileged, is to speak honestly and to speak bluntly and to give advice which is sound. And I don't think Andrew's received any sound advice.